On my first night at the hostel, rain tapped the window like an impatient visitor. I had taken the cheapest bed and told myself I would be brave. The owner, a thin man with tired eyes, handed me a key and nodded toward the stairs. "Fourth floor is closed," he said. "But listen, it keeps its sounds." I smiled to hide my worry. The building was old. The stairs were wood and whispered under my feet. My room smelled of tea and old paper. Photographs lined the hallways. One showed the hostel with every window bright. The top floor was dark in the picture. Someone had scrawled a chalk arrow pointing upward. It looked like a finger. That night the city slept. At midnight a sound crept through the walls. Footsteps. Heavy, then light. They walked the fourth floor. At first I thought of an upstairs neighbor. Then the rhythm made me still. Pause. 2 shuffles. A long drag. The sound had no ordinary shape. It felt like memory walking. I pressed my palms to my eyes. The footsteps paused outside my door and above it. My breath grew loud. I thought of leaving. I imagined the train and the bright platform. Instead, I stood and listened. I dressed and walked the hallway. The corridor smelled of lemon polish and dust. The door to the fourth floor held a crooked brass door. I touched the knob. It was cool and smooth. The landing light dimmed as I pushed open the door. The air on the fourth floor was colder. Posters on the wall were older. A child's drawing showed a house and an unmarked figure. My shoes made a soft noise I did not like. When I paused, the footsteps paused. When I moved, they began again, copying me with a patient precision. They led me to room 403. The footsteps hesitated by the door. Then they shifted inward. A whisper slid down the stairwell like a cold ribbon. The knob stuck and then turned. The room was small with a single bed and a mattress that looked unused. A photograph lay on the bedside table in a silver frame. A girl smiled in the picture. Someone had written a date and a name on the back. Her name was Mara. The date was 30 years old. A small shoe sat beside the frame. It was leather and tiny. A smear darkened its toe. I could not tell if it was rust or something worse. The footsteps were now at the foot of the bed. I felt them like fingers on the floorboards. I spoke the name half to test the air. Mara. The sound left my mouth like a pebble into still water. The photograph's glass trembled. A laugh dotted the corner of the room. The shoe shifted as if nudged by an invisible hand. A cool breath brushed my ankle. I knew then that the hostel kept tracks of people who had been there and could not leave. On the floor was a second photograph, turned face down. I flipped it and froze. The woman in the picture had the same eyes as my mother. Her hand rested on the girl's shoulder. Someone had written, "For when you forget." Memory folded in on itself. I had heard stories as a child about a lost girl in a hostel. My mother told them as warnings. I had believed them like myths. Now belief slid open like a door. Scenes came unbidden. A woman carrying a child, a slammed door, a scream that blurred. A pair of footsteps leaving and never stopping. The footsteps in the room were patient. They walked the edge of the bed, paced the small space, then stopped by the window. They did not ask for fear. They asked for a name. They needed to be remembered. I picked up the little shoe. My hands trembled. I said the name again, this time loud and steady. Mara. The word filled the room. The air warmed as if someone had left a cup of hot tea on the sill. The photograph shifted, and the girl's crooked smile widened. For a moment the space felt full of a light that belonged to memory and not to the dark. When I left 403, the hallway felt softer. The chalk arrow at the stairs still pointed up, but the building had less weight. The next morning I placed the small shoe on the front desk. The owner looked at it with slow, kind eyes. He didn't seem surprised. "She waited for someone to say her name," he said. He tapped the shoe like one might test a clock. I rode the train out of the city with the memory lodged at the base of my throat. Months later, I dreamt the hostel again. I stood by the window and watched tiny prints appear on the dusty glass of the front door below. They were fingertip marks, like a child drawing with sudden patience. Under them, someone had scrawled one word, Home. I do not know if the hostel's fourth floor is truly haunted or if it is simply a place where memory learned to walk. People live on in the sound of their own steps. If someone waits long enough for an answer, the house will keep calling until a voice answers. Saying a name is a way of giving someone back their place in the world. When I think of that night, I remember the warmth after the chill. I remember a photograph smiling back like proof. I remember the small shoe on the owner's palm. I remember the footsteps that only stopped when someone spoke. Sometimes there are things we cannot fix, but we can remember. We can say a name and make a room breathe again. I remember it.